of people joining in as we move on. So good morning, everybody. Welcome to webinar 4 of this series, Transforming Digital Fan Experience in Sports Through Gamification. Good evening and good afternoon to people joining from other parts of the world as well. So we have had 3 webinars before this one, as we know that this is a series, and we had some interesting discussions around digital innovation, sponsorships, as well as augmented reality in the digital fan ecosystem. So this one, we would be specifically focusing upon gamification. And just to clarify before we start off the webinar, to set the context, when we say gamification, it's not something that we relate to as esports, but gamification in the context of a more interactive and immersive fan experience for the fans of teams or leagues or specific players, and how do we get them engaged? Because the modern day fan, they have a lot of distractions, and it's not just one screen that they're focused upon. How do we kind of get them, get them to channelize that distraction in the form of, say, trivia, in the form of loyalty points and rewards, and how do we get their attention on the digital space? So that's what we're going to talk about. And before we start off, it's my duty to kind of introduce the panelists to you. My name is Venu. I'm your moderator for the day. And I'll just have a quick introduction of all the panelists we have today. First one, Randy. Randy Lewis is the Vice President of Marketing Technology for BSC Global and Brooklyn Nets. And he has a long range of history in terms of sports and tech tied together. Randy, welcome on board. Glad to have you here.
Likewise, thank you. Happy to be here. Thank you, Vinu.
Amazing. Next is Kristy Cannon. Kristy is a sports branding expert and a digital marketing expert as well. She's also a fan engagement consultant, and she has a lot of years of experience both on the brand side as well as the team side, and kind of bringing everything together. Kristy, welcome on board.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
Amazing, amazing. Third is Javier Altamirano. Javier is the Director of Innovation of Sportradar. I'm sure you must have heard about this organization. And he's based out of Minneapolis. And Javier is focused on coaching and mentoring and working with companies and involving ideas in sports tech. So Javier, welcome on board. I'm sure we'll have a lot of perspectives from your end as well on this.
Thank you, Venu. A pleasure to be here, and yeah, happy to be part of this.
Awesome. And last but not the least, we have Satish and Arvind. Satish is the CEO of Fenisco, the company that is organizing this webinar, and Arvind, who is the co-founder and Chief of Business Development. Welcome, Satish and Arvind.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Venu, and glad to be on the panel today.
Hey, thanks, guys. Thanks, Venu. Great panel here, and looking forward to a wonderful discussion.
Amazing, amazing. Cool. So, yep, without further ado, I'll just stop sharing my screen and we will quickly move on to the panel discussion. So how this would work is basically we have a set question, we have a few set questions for the panelists here, and we also did get a few questions during registration by the participants. And apart from that, we also have a Q&A panel on this Zoom webinar, and you could always post your questions in between whenever you want to ask a specific question to a panelist. And what we will do is we'll toggle between our questions and your question and, bring everything on board. So as far as possible, we'll try and manage time and, get all the questions answered. If not, we will, send you a personal email in terms of, what the panelists think about your question. So, yep, I will start off with the question that we have. So Javier, my first question is to you. It's a generic one to start off with. How can gamification enhance sports fans' experiences?
Excellent, thank you. I'll try to not give a generic answer. I will tell you a little bit of a personal story, right? So I grew up watching a lot of sports, so I would wake up early in the American continent to watch the Premier League on Saturdays and Sundays, right? But that was, an attitude and a behavior that was, true. I guess it was motivating enough a few years ago, but a few years later, I would sometimes wake up to play with my nephews a video game.
Okay.
Right? And that would be something that made me understand how the behavior has changed, right? Like the passive experience of just watching, passively sitting down on your couch, it doesn't necessarily cut it. And in the sense of, I'm not going into the details of the video game or sport, but like the fact that I'm interacting with what I am watching, right? So that type of experience, which is now more the norm than not the norm, I think
Correct.
that is probably what how gamification is important for a sports fan experience. Because if they're seeing gamification just about everywhere, how come they are not seeing gamification enough when they're watching a sports game?
Agreed. Absolutely right. Yep.
And one point to add to that, Venu, is
Mhm.
gamification from a fan engagement standpoint, right? It's a very good tool for the sports organizations to use it outside of the live event itself, right? So
Yep.
most of the time, if you take a football, you have one game a week, but there's like other days where fans can still be engaged by sending out a trivia to them, and certain elements, and you can have different kinds of simple gamification. Even you can use augmented reality to have a gamification tied to a leaderboard. And when fans can answer and show up on the leaderboard, they get rewards, right? So the loyalty rewards, or something like a signed jersey or merchandise from the team organizations, free tickets to some home games. So these are ways to build a loyal tribe of super fans and
Yes.
make them get closer to the team and keep them loyal.
Agreed, absolutely. And the funny thing is, now in this COVID era, it becomes even more important to kind of get that digital fan base going, because we're looking at fanless stadiums worldwide with leagues and matches that have started now. So that's kind of imperative that the teams focus more and more on building that digital community going forward, because there's something which nobody planned for. But if somebody had a vision of having a digital fan base, they would have actually been seeing the fruits of it by now, right? Interesting. So my next question is for Kristy. So how can gamification be used to enhance the value or ROI that sponsors get for their investment with the sports organizations?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the biggest opportunity, and the reason why all partners, want to be involved in sports and with a sports league and team, is that we never know when the big moments are going to happen, when the buzzer beater is going to happen, when the game winner, when that epic moment that we can't predict when, but we know they happen, right? So the opportunity to be attached to that in a very deep and meaningful way, that a fan was able to participate in that moment a little bit more, extensively than just passively watching or being, maybe tweeting about it or doing something, taking some sort of action like that, which has been sort of what's happened up till now. But now with gamification, you add an enhanced layer to where, do you predict this game or this series is going to go to 7 games? And presented by so and so, and I said yes, I do, and I ended up being right. And now that company can acknowledge that in me, and that's a very meaningful thing at that point. So that becomes an opportunity. And I think wherever a partner gets to attach to the sport and the fan base and the experience in the most meaningful way, that is going to add ROI. And that is really why sports is such a great platform for sponsorships and extending other brands.
Agreed. And I think, just to add to your point, there's something which we even discussed in one of the previous webinars, but when it comes to sponsorships, right? With digital as a platform, it gives people so many options, right? Teams and leagues have so many options to launch different campaigns for different sponsors. It's not just logo slapping anymore on the field or the field of play, right? So there's so many things that you could do to innovate. And obviously the ROI is something which will definitely be there for each sponsor or each, campaign that you launch, right? So interesting. Next question is for Randy. So gamification has penetrated into several sectors like retail, healthcare, real estate, but has yet to become a mainstream in the sports industry. Why is it so?
Well, so I think the simplest answer to that is, and I'll speak to, specifically the big four, right? Major League Baseball, the NBA, the NFL, and the NHL is, I've just wrapped up my 10th season with Brooklyn Nets. And, what I found is that the big four sports just tend to be late adopters, right? I mean, that's the simplest answer that I can give to that question. And while everybody wants to innovate, it's very few that actually want to be the first. So, I do see a lot more innovation and risk taking when you look at sports overseas. the Premier League and things like that, even Formula One racing, like they tend to be a bit more progressive with some of the innovation and tech platforms. So, and I do think there is, for a long time, there's been this position, I think Mark Cuban was very vocal about it, is that, I don't want people looking at their devices, I want people watching the event. So I think there is a bit of that. I think there's been an evolution of that, but I do think that there is a common sentiment out there that, hey, we don't want to take away from what's happening on the court, on the field, as it were, on the ice, if you will. So I think there's, that's the primary driver. I mean, I think we'll touch on some of the other drivers and challenges, but if you ask me why, sports is late to the game, it's probably as simple as that.
Agreed. So do you think that, the focus might be changing from what you mentioned about, we don't want people to look at their devices and focus on the game to, we want people to look at their devices now? Is that the focus, changing towards that side of things?
Yeah, I think there's an evolution and just a belief that, hey, what's happening on the device can complement what's happening on the court or on the field, as opposed to detracting from what's happening.
Absolutely. Very well said. I think, it's there to
one point, Randy, I mean, if I may ask you, right? So that what you mentioned is kind of tied to the live event itself, right? But what has been the thought for teams like you to engage fans outside of the live event, on the digital platforms? As they obviously, content is always the key, right? Content is the king, and you use content and social media on your own platforms. But has there been, progress or thoughts on how to use gamification for engaging fans outside of the live event when there is no season, no games?
Yeah, I mean, we rolled out in Q1, a shot clock challenge where we enabled our Nets fans to participate on behalf of the Nets and compete against other teams who were also on the platform. So, to your point, not tied to a game or an event happening on the court, but I think it did so there were a couple things that I think were really great about it. One, fans felt like they were participating on behalf of the team, right? Like, and I'm helping the Nets win. We're playing the Hawks, and we're going to beat the Hawks fans at this game. So that was very successful for us, and something we'll continue. I think getting the other teams to agree for ongoing participation is a challenge that's being worked through now. But I think there are opportunities for that now. If you can tie that to a sponsor and create a platform, I think that's the approach. Just attacking this as a one-off, hey, we're going to roll out this game. I mean, as Kristy can probably speak to even better than I, is it's about building these platforms, as opposed to just something that's kind of that one-off.
I agree. And you made a great point about everybody, getting together and being part of something bigger. And we know that, the younger generations love that, and connecting to communities, the way that you guys were able to do with that activation with where you were sort of, representing the Nets against the rest of the league. That's really cool, because I think that appeals to that desire from the younger sports fans.
Yeah, and it galvanizes the fan base, right? I mean, they feel like they're part of the team and the group, and I think when you can do that's a win all around.
Yep. So just a quick follow-up here to you, Randy, before we move to the next question. It's kind of similarly linked to this question. It has been used in sports broadcasting for several years, gamification, but sports organizations have not embraced it in terms of engaging fans directly. So is there a cost and lack of understanding preventing it in terms of the widespread in the sports organization sector?
Yes, there is. I think so there are a couple ways to approach this, and I think it was mentioned earlier on, like, loyalty is a great way. I mean, we always thought about loyalty and awarding points and badges and things based on incentivized fan behavior, right? So if you think about it in terms of, hey, arrive to the arena early, or make sure you're tuning in because we're going to ask a question related to something that happened in the game. Follow us or retweet, this. So those loyalty points and rewards were always, in the sports world, kind of driven on or based on incentivized behavior for the fan. So I think, that is shifting a bit, and it should be based on your engagement with the team and your engagement with our platforms, as opposed to simply just, some behavior that is favorable for us, right? So it's definitely becoming a more fan focused, and that we're looking at it through that different lens of like, how, as opposed to how is this going to benefit the team or the venue or the organization, and how is this going to connect us to the fan, and it's got to be sticky first and foremost, right? So
yeah, Javier, you wanted to say something?
All right. Yeah, Randy, you made me think of I guess some of the non-good examples that you see out there, right? There was an airline that they I got an email and saying something about like, yeah, play this game with us and blah blah blah. So I was curious. I'm generally very very curious about this topic. So I was like, okay, what's this game about? So it's like, hey, buy a ticket today and then you get so many miles. I'm like, well, this is just a behavior that benefits them. So where's the gamification in it? So you made me chuckle when you mentioned that.
Interesting. So we have an audience question coming up. So slightly longer question. Maybe I'll just throw it open to the panel. Most of the this is by Pushkar. Most of the innovations that happen in sports is driven by an inherent need to make it more lucrative for advertisers and sponsors associated. If we were to look at gamification and innovation, these would then again need to be time-bound, primarily during a league or a month prior and after, taking into consideration the resources that go into the league. Isn't there a challenge in terms of what happens to new gamifications after the league is over? So it's an interesting question. So Satish, you want to take it first, or?
Sure. Yeah, I think, that's a very good segue for, like for this discussion too, right? So typically there are, when you have a platform and then when you are having gamification on the platform, that's a big challenge, right? For teams to, if you embed the game into that platform, then if you want to release a new game or do something, it's always a challenge because they have to now kind of rebuild it. It's kind of like goes as a project, right? The technology is changing and you have to do it as a project. And that's kind of one reason why technology always becomes a bottleneck to roll out, or more adaptive type of gamification outputs, or for that matter, any type of experiences for fans, right? So, but now, interestingly, the technology is getting matured, right, or is maturing. And being from a fan engagement sports tech company, we see that every month, right, we see the technology getting more mature, where you can introduce some of these gamifications on, if I'm a sports organization, right, you can do it and push it from the cloud, right? So that way you can have a dynamic type of gamification or dynamic type of experiences. Today it might be sponsored by one sponsor, and tomorrow if you want to change it to or completely another mini game or something that you want to push it can be done now. So that level of technology maturity is improving. But again, the onus is on the sports organization as well, right? I mean, the sports organization has to be innovative or willing to innovate, and has to adopt to that changes. And not think of their digital as a one-off thing, but more of a continuous evolvement or continuous enhancement that needs to happen. Unfortunately, we buy phones every year, and the Apple and Google, for that, I mean, simple example is Apple and Google come up with the new versions and new capabilities. So fans expect that from the sports organization as well. And now sports organizations have to do that, right? So putting together everything, adopting emerging tech is an easy way to have dynamic, experiences like this released continuously.
So Arvind, I think you would have experienced a lot of this in your discussions with teams and leagues, right? In terms of what happens after the league is over, right? So that's another interesting aspect which you added to the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Again, right. So one of the points from the question itself, right, there is a resource constraint aspect as well. One is the time boundness. right, of all these initiatives, right? But there is also the resource constraint that happens, right? So see, it's going to be a collaborative effort at the end of the day, right? The sports tech organizations alone, right, cannot go in and say that, hey, this is something, it's a cool toy, let's go ahead and use, right? So you need to build that awareness, right? But also the sports organizations, the visionaries, right, should be actively involved and invested, right, in these kind of initiatives. So the digital aspect of doing a business, right, it's not born like one day and then you're doing all of the things, right? So it's strategy in itself. It's a multi-year thing, right? There is a lot of prep that needs to happen. So, for example, if an organization has not had like a proper digital infrastructure, you cannot expect them to go and do something like an augmented reality or virtual reality kind of gamification, right? They are start small. So there is an inherent investment that has to be made, right? But the way we are seeing the landscape changing or transforming is pre-COVID and during the COVID era, and also like the post-COVID, right? Now there is a more emphasis around digital, say, being one of the top priorities, even from the organization standpoint. So we are getting a lot of requests around, hey, what are some of the things that as an organization, right, that we can do, right, in orderly like engaging with the fan base. But the most important aspect of the sports organizations is one of the things is they want to make sure that they provide a better ROI, right, for all of their stakeholders. So so how do we like bridge that gap, right? So we're having those kind of interesting discussions, and gamification and technology, as Satish alluded, right? It's improving. There is much more you can do from technology aspect, from gamification perspective as well, right? It's just a matter of understanding, say, where the organizations are from a digital maturity curve perspective, right? And prescribing a phased approach, right, to these kind of initiatives.
Agree.
Yes, if I may add to it, it comes down. I think that's a great answer, Irvin. So there's also the aspect of like what's available now versus what was available before, right? So I mean, we're lucky. We work with over 60 organizations, leagues, and federations around the world. Some of the top ones, we have access to very accurate data and like, to the dot machine vision capture of what's happening in the court, right? Now, we have a lot of more data sets than before, and more than even a human can do. So now all of those things are available out there, right? Now, if you go also historically and you tie things up, you can even start projecting what's going to happen, right? So because now there's a lot of possibilities out there to understand, if there's a milestone that is upcoming, right? So if LeBron scores another 16 points in tonight's game, he will have reached whatever amount. So there is a lot of this streaks, right? Like, oh, if the Astros win another game, they will have won 10 in a row the season, and they will tie their best streak in the last 20 years. So there's a lot of information that's available out there. It also takes companies with the tech know-how to go and help educate leagues, which are and teams which are normally either bound to whatever their normal day-to-day roles are, so they don't have that capacity. So that's when there's the need for tech companies who are able, sports tech companies who are able to tie the two dots, right? The need on the one hand, and the capacities and the new available data and information available that is out there, to really come and deliver something cool for the fans.
Fair enough. Yep, makes sense. Okay, so next question is for Kristy. This is an interesting one. How do sports organizations see gamification? Is it a mere technology or a marketing vehicle? So that's something which is interesting.
Yes, and it can sometimes, I suppose, depend on who you ask, right? But we go back to that point earlier that was made. You're looking to create a platform, so you're looking at the sport as a platform rather than looking at it as a product. And so, the marketing teams are very interested in the ways that it can enhance what they're doing. the connection with fans, as well as sponsorship teams who are obviously looking to capture those special moments and attach their brands and themselves to the sports fans' experience. And so in doing so, there's a ton of opportunity, but I think it needs to be thought of as a way to, grow within the space, and to, I look at it as sort of, you've got a captive audience, and probably your most engaged audience is going to pick up the phone and really follow along and predict it and predict what's going to happen and really play and be super engaged.
Yep.
But as you work through and as you kind of paint the roadmap for how you're going to grow, if you can deepen that engagement and then bring somebody closer as you're going, right? Bring the fan that isn't quite casual or that is more casual into a little bit more of a engaged fan and a little bit more of an engaged fan. And over time, that thing will snowball. And then the magic is when you end up, accumulating and building that community into something bigger through, practicing this, with regularity and being consistent. You can't just show up and then expect, this is going to work day one and we're going to get, we're going to break records. You have to be, kind of committed to the idea that you're pushing fans sort of down this scale. Or up the scale, better. You're pushing that fan up the scale where they just started as they're there, to see how it was and have a little bit of fun with it. And then, you've gotten them in and engaged in new and more exciting ways.
Yep. And interesting, you spoke about brands and sponsors. So do they see this as, something for brand awareness, or also something, which is much more detailed in terms of a call to action with the fans?
I mean, both, I would hope. I think that depending on where each fan is in their fandom or in their engagement, always hoping to make that more meaningful and make that deeper. I think it's kind of like a scale, like I mentioned. And so, ultimately, you've done a great job if fans were just sort of, maybe reluctant or maybe, gaming or engaging along with, one or two games here and there. And then now you've got them at the playoffs and they're doing it every single playoff game. And then at the end of that season, you can really look back and say, we grew this and we got fans on board into what we were trying to do. And I just think, you have to, like anything else in technology and anything else new, you got to give it its time to grow and to be consistent.
And one point to add there is, with the fans getting rewards, right, for their interaction or winning a leaderboard and, top 10 get something and all, right. So that is what kind of builds that loyalty for fans to keep coming back. And that's your call to action when you asked, right? So now sponsors, rather than just kind of eyeball measure, now, giving something for these fans to claim a discount in addition to some price, or the sponsor can give away the prices too. Then you're tying everything together and seeing clear ROI, right? So.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so I have a slightly, just kind of taking our focus and attention to another topic, and this is for Javier. So betting and fantasy are engaging fans during live sports, okay? Why haven't sports organizations leveraged gamification as a strategy to engage fans outside of the live event? So, kind of tying this to betting and fantasy, which is something which you know a lot about.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're in the intersection of betting and media, right? And a lot of our clients are in the fantasy sports world, especially in this side of the world, of course, and then in Europe and little by little more on the betting side in the US as well. Other than what I see is that you have a lot of the fandom are it's like so historical, right? And so used to, it's easier to go through a path that has already been walked over, right? So people are so used to doing the same thing. Like we engage highly during the game. Like this is like where my peak attention is, and that's it. And then there's I guess there's still a hunger for information, right? Where it's like your stats, or where it's information about the players and the athletes. You even go and see their personal life, right, through Twitter or what have you. Now, the situation I feel is that there's the broadcasters, they don't fix something that is not broken, right? So if they still getting money from their advertisers, you know, and the leagues are still getting money from broadcasters, well, there's, you know, why fix what's not broken, right? Now that I think holds true for the top and the bigger leagues, and that's I mean, probably Randy can talk more about that as a team, but I think that if you either there's two things happening. There's disruption that's going on right now in the market. So we are changing how people experience sports, and you know, the cable cutters, etc. So there will be need for people to be able to engage in a different way, and gamification is certainly one. I mean, in the fantasy space, we've seen some things interesting in the past years with draft, with Underdog, who are taking the experience of drafting for fantasy leagues. So for those who are not very familiar with the sport, like one of the cooler parts of it is drafting your players for your own team, right? And that's more of a, it's not necessarily, you know, I mean, doesn't necessarily have to be a sport thing, but it's more of a social interaction with your friends, where you're able to, oh, he's going to take the player that I want. So there's that emotion, and that you know, it goes deeper into the biology, right? So the more of a gamification experience can go and touch the person and their biology and their sociological needs, the better. Now there's certainly room, and there are some things that are being done out there in between a game and another game, or in between a season and another season. But I think there's certainly a lot of room to grow in that outside of when the game is live.
Yes, I think it's you kind of mentioned it right in terms of the emotional connect with the fan, and that's something which would always bring out the best in a fan when it comes to these kind of experiences, right? Okay, so we have a couple of interesting audience questions, and I think one is directed towards Randy, so I'll go with that first. So Randy, this is by Julian, and so the question is, there have been a lot of initiatives around fan rewards programs over the last 10 years in the 4 major US leagues like Club 1909. Do you think it works well?
That's a very general question. I think, yes, generally it does and it can, but I've seen it not work well as many times as I've seen it work well. So,
okay. Interesting. So there's one more question. Sorry,
to add to Randy's point, right? I think 10 years back, the whole technology landscape was different, right? So how the loyalty points would work and all that. So now it does. See, we have to give that benefit of doubt for an innovative idea, right? It didn't work in the past, so I'm not going to do it. It may not be the right strategy.
Correct.
You know, there are multiple ways to kind of make it happen now, right? So that's why I mean, being much more closer to technology, I always feel that you know, every era has something that clicks, something that doesn't click, but it clicks in the future, right? You might be ahead of the time at that back 10 years back, but so that's why you have to give it a chance. So I feel, I also, like Randy said, if you've done it correctly, it can work, and again, it may not work if you don't do it correctly as well.
I have to sense on here too. So as, you know, as part of my work, we have our accelerator program, which is our effort to help early stage startups innovate. And I see exactly what Satish is saying. I see that a lot. Timing is key, right? So you don't want to have a fantastic solution out of time. Now there's you know, people probably would have tried, I don't know if you tried an AR solution 3, 4, 5 years ago, the experience might be very, very different than if you try it. Now we have COVID, where you know, a lot of like super fans are going to be staying at home and watching, experiencing the game at home versus in a stadium, right? So how do you get people immersed there, right? So there's also 5G that's on now, so that allows the capability, the computing capability, you know, that we all have here is like way more than it was 2, 4, 6, 10 years ago, right? So definitely the timeliness in that for companies whenever they're trying something. So I totally second what you said, Satish. Like, not because something didn't work before means that it doesn't work. It's all about timing. So it's about understanding, seeing, okay, what is timely now that may not have been timely 2 years ago.
Yes, I think. Sorry, go ahead, Randy.
No, I mean, just to piggyback on the AR thing, I think that's a great example because AR was all the rage, 6, 7 years ago when, there were production quality, issues with AR. And then I think people that did it, right, how are you able to monetize that, right? I think that was a big wall that people were running into. Hey, this is great, and people are going to jump on and do it, but how are we monetizing it outside of just slapping a sponsor logo on it, right? And the approach has to be a platform building approach, and if it's not, it's everybody's confused.
Agree. And I think, when you mentioned about timing, it's also about the demographics as well in terms of where are you launching that campaign? What's the consumer behavior like in that geography, right? So all that needs to be taken into account as well. Sorry, Arvind, you were saying something.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree with Randy's point too, and what Javier brought to the table. So, I mean, we are having conversations, say, even the past week when we had a conversation with one of our clients, right? They tried out AR a few years back. And again, AR a few years back was not up to the mark, right? As what we see now in the global landscape, right? The onus is also on the sports tech organizations as well, right? To build that awareness, because a lot of the organizations that we talk to, right, they've done bits and pieces of AR in the past, right? And clearly the technology was not up to the mark, right? So you got to now you got to take that no, right? And how do you convert that yes, right? So the onus is on some of these sports tech organizations to build that awareness, to educate the market and say that, hey, some of the things that you've done in the past may not have worked, right? But now it's changing, right? The technology has improved vastly, right? And also, if you look at the demographic and the landscape that is consuming this, right? Even those are changing now. Millennials, right? They are more into the second screen concept. They know, say, how these things work, right? They want those kind of activations as well, right? So there are a variety of these parameters that have changed in the past few years. So now it's just a matter of educating them, right? Creating that awareness and letting them know that, hey, there is a clear ROI, right, for these kind of initiatives.
Yes, agreed. And I think on the same note, I'll probably add up another follow-up question from the audience itself. So Yogesh is asking, what are some of the best examples of gamification you can quote, and how have they enhanced the sporting experience? So it's kind of open to the panel. Who wants to go first? Satish?
We tried gamification with a couple of examples that I can say from our clients, right? So one was it's a fight league. They wanted to engage the audience, right? Usually in a fight league, the cage is in the center and people sit all outside, and they wanted to engage the fans who come into the stadium and watch it. So the way they did was they ran some prediction, who's going to win and how they're going to win, like knockout or decision and all, and how many rounds it's going to go and all, right? So when fans answer every fight, they for a fight event, they'll have, for a 3 or 4 hour event, they'll have 10 fights, and for every fight they brought that fan who won and made them sit just in front of the cage. Right. So now it was because somebody comes to a fight event to watch the cage, what happens in the cage, right? So that was a very good, exciting event. And then they were able to tie to the sponsors who were sponsoring the live event. That's an example of in-game experience, right? Using technology, how you can gamify that. And another example that I can give for another client in Asia was, they did an augmented reality face filter. Again, that was due to a sponsor wanting something. That was a couple of years back. And we supported them with that. And the gamification they ran was, on social media, was share the best selfie of the day or selfie of the week, right? And then they were giving away prizes to fans, it's just kind of getting the fans do something and shared on social media. That created a virality, and the post went viral, and the fans were able to participate and get prizes like tickets to the home games, or if signed merchandise, right? So couple quick examples. And again, there isn't, if you really think about it, of course, there isn't a big technology component here, but still the strategy around how you run that gamification was more impactful.
Interesting. Okay, so
Yeah, I would just to layer on. I mean, I'm a big fan, and maybe it's a generational thing. So, but I'm a big fan of the predictive gaming. I think it's sticky. It will keep people engaged. So, whether that's asking who's going to hit the first 3-pointer of the game, or from a retrospective, who hit the at halftime. If you ask who hit the first 3-pointer of the game, right? You're driving incentive for people to watch, to be engaged. I think Javier touched on something earlier that was, integrating the technology that exists in sports into the fan experience. I mean, and I think of it, if we were to use an NBA example, going to say, well, who had the fastest time from foul line to foul line, running up the court? Who had the highest vertical leap in today's game? Trajectory of the ball on a shot. Like, we have access to all of this data, and it's very detailed data that's tied specifically to performance analytics, if you will. So to be able to leverage that into, a fan engaging, because, and I remember seeing this with the World Cup, years back when they would tell me how far a player ran during a game. I was like, that's awesome. I would never think to, wow, this guy ran 6.5 miles during the game today. Now you're taking performance analytics and, making it interesting for me. And if we could gamify that, I mean, that's a home run.
absolutely agree. Yeah. I think that's giving, much more to the fans in terms of the viewership experience, as well as, understanding what's going on in the middle, with their favorite players and stuff. Yeah. Interesting.
Absolutely. I just wanted to say that the second poll coming up, but to piggyback on also what Randy was saying, I think I guess one of those that will never die, right? Like the predictive, what's going to happen next, right? So now the breadth and the depth of data that's coming out, it's changing, right? Before probably you could only predict if somebody want to score, but now it's going to be like, how, exactly what minute and how much and how far is the defendant going to be, etc. From thinking of a basketball or something. Yeah. But also the fact that you can integrate enhance the user experience, right? So you think about, I mean, for those who are not married or anything, Tinder, right? So that easy like swipe left, right type of thing, right? When you add that to a binary question to make things so much easier for fans, or even like, do you simplify it for those who are not hardcore fans, but who are able to comment? If you boil it down to a binary question, it makes it that much simpler and that much easier to reach a broader audience of your fans, right? And you may even be able to educate them through that type of gamification. I've seen also some companies even like utilizing haptics, right? Just like very simple details that you can add to your experience that's going to make it, that much more intuitive and easy to pick up and easy to, to go. We're competing right now, or like experiences and sports companies, you're competing with everybody, right? So before it used to be like, oh, if you're from this league, you're competing against this other sport. Now you're competing against that and everything that's on Netflix and everything that's on YouTube and everything that's on, available.
Yes, absolutely right. It's a juggle out there on the internet. Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, and quick point to add is, right, imagine if you're able to offer this in your own platform. If I'm a sports team, if I'm offering this to my fans on my own platform, like say an app or something, you are kind of having everybody contained in your platform, right? So you're not taking them away from it, and also now you are able to keep them within your platform, and that's going to give you a lot more insights on how many fans engage, how they engage, which part of it engage, and all those things.
So Satish, hold on to that thought, because there's some kind of telepathy. I was about to ask this question next, and Julian has already put it on the Q&A box. So the question is, aren't social networks becoming competitors to great sports franchises in terms of the fan data monetization? Is there a challenge for big sports franchises to bring back fan data in-house that is outside the walled gardens of social media? So exactly your point, which you are mentioning right now. How do we kind of get them on our platform? Maybe Kristy and Satish, you could answer this question.
I'll let Randy and Kristy answer it because they come from a team standpoint, right? And
all right. All right. So maybe Kristy, you can go first, and then Randy.
Definitely.
Yep.
Yeah, as far as, and one of the other questions I was going to speak to had to do with attribution as well. Keeping all of the social conversation, on social media. I think early on when social media first came around, around 2007, 2008, teams reacted quickly, and some teams were even building their own versions, their own little mini versions of social media, because they were already thinking, we don't want to let this interaction and this engagement happen elsewhere, and then those efforts were sort of, that it didn't catch on, and a lot of that thinking went away because you can't compete with the individualism that a Facebook is going to give a fan, right? And the individualism you get on your personal Instagram, because that is the appeal, right? That's why those platforms succeed to the way that they do, is that it gives that fan their own voice. It gives them their own identity on those platforms. And that's kind of hard thing to replicate. But what you can do is that you can offer an easy way to put out the best content directly from the team using that app, right? So I can be a rock star on Instagram because I have the best content from my favorite team, and I'm able to personalize it, add my input to it, put it out on my channel, and impress my friends on my platform, right? So that's just going to be the behavior of the fan. And if we're thinking fan first, which we should always be, right, we have to acknowledge the fact that they want it to be that personal, and they want it to come from them, and they are going to be very individualized. So instead of trying to beat them at their own game, right, of course, having them interact on your platform, if you own it as a team, is going to be better in terms of attribution, in terms of understanding your fans. But you got to give them what they want. They still are going to want to go to Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and they're still going to want to look like the authority and the biggest fan and the coolest fan with the hottest information. And I'm posting the clip that literally happened, 30 seconds ago. It's already on my feed because I grabbed it straight from the source, and now that makes me an even more excellent digital fan, than, the next guy. And I think that really is going to be what fans want to see. So it's not about competing with them. It's about, in my opinion, it's really more about, it's really about the fan, making the fan look like the awesomest fan, the biggest fan, the one with the best content. And the fans are going to go where the best content originates. And if the best content's going to originate on the team platform, then the fans will go there first. And then they will do your work for you, because they will evangelize your moment and your message and your, on their own, because they want to do it from their personal perspective and where they're sitting. And so I think it's just, being a compliment and enabling that fan to be the best fan they want to be anyway. So it's kind of, I think that's a really fun part of it as well.
Agreed, Randy?
Yeah, well, listen, if it is a competition, it's the most lopsided competition I've ever seen in my life, because I can tell you Facebook has more data on people than any sports franchise can ever hope to have. So we are losing badly if it's a competition. But I think Kristy makes a great point, that it is, we do look at it as a compliment. Look, when I started, I mean, great example is, I would always talk to people about what keeps me up at night. And it was always, well, understanding who's in the building, because on average, people are buying 3 tickets to an event. Most people are buying 2 or 4, so it nets out to an average of 3 tickets. So I would have a lot of data and information on the person that buys the ticket. But I would have 0 information on the other 2 people accompanying that person. So that means 66% of the people that are coming to an event at my building, I have no idea who they are, right? I mean, that's huge, because that's lost opportunity. So, I think the digital evolution is changing that, right? Digital tickets and phones and devices. The fact that, all of my information, my ticket information, whether it's a loyalty program, my season ticket membership card, all of that is now, on my device. And people are not in the habit of saying, here, hold my phone, right? Like, it's a very personal thing, right? We're not passing this back and forth. So to the extent that I can capture information from the device, whether that's through app engagement, ticketing, social engagement, things like that. I mean, that's bridging that gap quite a bit, but we are nowhere close to having the type of information that the social platforms have on fans. And you know, what's interesting is people are giving up their information on Facebook and Instagram and everything, like almost unwittingly. You know, as a sports franchise, we do have the benefit of fans want us to know, they want to tell us about themselves, right? So it's a double-edged sword, for better or worse, right? They want to engage with us for the good stuff and also the bad stuff. But we have the luxury of just asking people to tell us, and they will. You know, so again, to Kristy's point, not competition, but complementary at the end of the day.
Yeah, fair enough. I think that's a great point, complementing the social media strategy and bringing them on the platform.
Yeah, I mean, valuable points, right, from both Randy and Kristy. So again, never. I mean, it's not always a good strategy to look at the social media giants as a competition, because it's not an apples to apples comparison, right? The strategy should be to, hey, how I can, as a sports organization, leverage those platforms, right, and build a community, right? And Kristy brought up a very good point. The fans will go wherever they see that original content, right? If it's coming from the team, right, or the league themselves, then that's where the fans will go, because everybody is looking for the next big thing, or the next good thing, or the next original thing, right? So you have the option to create those exclusivity, right? And that can very well start from your own platform, right? Whether that's your app or your social media channels or your web, right? It doesn't matter. So the one thing that the sports organizations may not want to do, right, is to force a fan to do something that's outside of their norm, right? It should always be the focus should be around, hey, if you're on the social media, so be it, right? I'm going to go there, right? I'm going to put some creatives around that, right, and make sure that I'm going to engage you in the social media, right? Once you start doing that, then if you are like creating those original content within your platform, the fans are going to come there, right? And you are going to get your data. So it has to be strategic from that aspect, right? And never forceful.
Yeah, to add to Arvind's point, right, in the context of gamification, you can run gamification on your social media channel. You know, you can use Facebook Instant Messenger or Instagram Messenger and use a chat bot to run a trivia gamification or a prediction gamification, right? And if the same fan comes to your app, continue that experience, right? So now you're not forcing him. Maybe, you know, you put a teaser on social media, they like it, and then they funnel into your platform, right? So that's there. Another point I want to touch upon is the data, right? So, you know, like 5 years, even 5 years back, 4 or 5 years back, you could get every data about a fan from Facebook and Instagram and all those places, right? But now, with all this privacy discussions going on, you know, GDPR and everywhere, Facebook restricts what we can get, Apple restricts what we can get, Google restricts what, you know, like you can get, right? So now it is very valuable for you to bring your fan to on your own platform, and again, not forcing it, but more strategically funneling them into your platform by giving some exclusive experiences, exclusive rewards, and incentivizing them. That's what connects. And then the teams already have a lot of data, like their CRM data, their ticketing data, their stadium data, and all things. How do you connect all the data points in the back end? That's what is important for you, right? So you can collect the data. I don't know, we were having the discussion couple days back. There's no use in having data, right, for the sake of having data. How do you connect the dots, right? That's going to be a big opportunity where you can understand your fan, personalize it, tell your ROI, to your sponsors, this is my fan base, right? So which will completely tell you a different story, right? So it's all connected.
Yep. And I think on that same note, maybe we have time for one last question. Javier, I'll probably go with you first. How can gamification be used as an effective sponsor activation strategy and create new revenue streams, based on the thought that Satish mentioned the last, in terms of the sponsors getting into the act using that data?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just going to continue with what Satish was saying, that we've been it's going to be it's going to sound like, I guess, like a more sport radar kind of selling proposition, but it's more as an example of what we've done with our clients, right? Like throughout the years, we've been doing this for 20 years. We realized that we have bookmakers on the one side, and also the media on the other side, right? So what we did is we created a product called Ads, where we created a DMP, so data management platform, and that allows us to know who's reading certain article, right? So we were able to insert a widget and allow for people to, by gamifying the experience, if you're reading an article on Tom Brady, well, guess what question is going to come up, right? So Tom Brady, how effective is he when he goes over 6 yards versus 10 yards, etc. So by people playing in this, or by gamifying this experience, we're able to understand who is behind reading that article, and our clients benefit from taking that data. So I think it's pretty much on the case in point of what you were talking about, Satish, and it's just, I mean, but just applied, I guess, in a different context in our case. But we're in a way gamifying the experience of our users or our readers on the one side, but then to allow to have basic information and very key information for somebody else on the side, right? Like if you're a bookmaker, you don't want to be advertising to somebody underage. You don't want to be advertising to someone who's probably not going to be, so it's not effective, even also from a moral standpoint for first, but the second point is also from the, you want to be more effective and utilize your marketing dollars better. So I think that's exactly what advertisers and sponsors want to see. They want to see something effective, and creating that database is to know who is behind and who you can reach and who will be able to benefit from what you offer to the market.
Correct. So it's more, behavioral study of the fans based on that data, and how do we use sponsors to kind of, leverage on that, right? So yeah, fair enough. Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to be able to meet them where they are.
Yep. Maybe I'll just quickly come up with one last short question. Arvind, probably you could take it up, being from the marketing standpoint. Can we group types of gamification based on budget? This was a question sent to us during the registration for the webinar. So since you speak to a lot of teams, you might be experiencing this discussion, in most of your communications.
Yes, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so can we group types of gamifications based on budget?
Yes, we certainly can. Again, right? So from an organization perspective, right? You got to assess, say, where you are from the digital maturity curve, right? And based on that, start off with something small, right? Where the budget is not going to be a big of a concern. So, for example, creating a poll or a trivia, right? Types of gamification is not going to dent, right? From the marketing budget perspective, right? You already have all the platforms. You can run that, as Satish pointed out, right? Even in social media, right? So that's not going to stop you, or you don't need a cool technology or a gadget, right, to carry out those kind of simple gamification, right? So there is a budget associated with that, right? And basically depends on, say, where you're at, right? For an organization that is just starting out on the digital transformation path, right? We don't prescribe some of the advanced gamification elements, right? That we can offer, right? Probably that's not a right strategy. One, they're not going to be ready for that, right? And two, it's going to cost a lot, right? So maybe like starting off with some simple gamified approach will be an ideal task. Even looking at the loyalty rewards, right? If as a fan, if I'm a season ticket holder, then how can I provide some personalized experiences, right? Whether that's through gamification or through a rewards program, right? That's a better way to approach this, right? Than looking at some of the cooler and nicer technologies that's out there, right? So that's how we kind of like provide our feedback and guidance whenever we talk to different sport organizations. So there is definitely like the budget comes into play, right? That's one of the key aspects when we talk to those sports organizations. But you can do a lot with even a very small budget.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it has to be more horses for courses, right? It can't be one size fits all. Yeah. So Satish, you had one quick point, I believe, with regards to blockchain, right? There is a question and we'll probably end on this one for sure. So we hear that blockchain is the future of loyalty programs, security, GDPR, cost, interoperability, and we see teams like Sacramento Kings starts using it. Do you think it's an interesting technology for fan engagement, creating teams, tokens, or currencies?
Yeah, I think I also saw, forgot which soccer team in Europe, they sold out the fan tokens in, within minutes or something like that. It's an interesting, emerging technology, finding its way into sports tech. But again, to Randy's point, like someone has to try it first, the adoption. So depending on how they use it, everyone is going to find some use cases around it. But the fan token concept itself has nothing to do with blockchain, right? So fan token is a generic concept, right? But blockchain is used to do it, to give more credibility to that program. So you have to find the right use case. Again, there is no point in using emerging tech for the sake of using it. So you have to find the right use case and see how it embeds into the overall program.
Great. So yeah, I think we have pretty much answered all the questions today from the audience side. And I think whatever we had on board as questions have been covered in all the discussions that we already had. So on that note, I would like to thank you all. Thank you to all the panelists and speakers. It was a great discussion, and I certainly loved moderating this, and enjoyed interacting with you and the audience as well. And I'm sure the audience would have gained a lot of insights from these discussions. So once again, thank you, and have a great day. And we will just send out a short survey form for the audience. It will be just 2 or 3 minutes survey form, just a 1-pager. And we'll really appreciate if you could just send it out and send back to us. So thank you, guys. Have a great rest of the day, and good night to everybody from the other parts of the world. So we'll be in touch. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.